A prenuptial agreement is a legal agreement between you and your soon-to-be marriage partner that talks about and defines what is separate property, what is marital property, and what happens in the event of a breakup. We also include provisions that talk about what happens in the event of death of one of you. So if one of you should predecease the other, what happens with any of the assets? It could be their separate or marital property. What happens in that event? In New York, we have a lot of legal concepts that are dealt with in the event of a breakup or a divorce. And when you're working on a prenuptial agreement, it's very important to understand all these various legal concepts. One of them is separate property and marital property. New York is considered a marital property state, and so it's important to understand what is separate property and marital property. Generally speaking, separate property is anything that you have acquired in your life from the day you were born until the day before your marriage. And marital property is anything that was accumulated from the date of your marriage until one of you files for divorce or one of you passes away. That's typically the general definitions. A prenuptial agreement is a document that's created between you and your partner. And it's a way for you to essentially rewrite the rules that we have in New York. So if you didn't have a prenuptial agreement, and God forbid your relationship didn't work out, you would be applying all the laws of New York with respect to all of your assets. So here's an opportunity when you're putting together an agreement, a prenuptial agreement with your partner, where you get to redefine those rules. So while New York has its own definition of what is separate property, what is marital property, the two of you can modify it. You can keep those same definitions and you can add to it and you can modify it however you want. For example, let's say, well, in New York, any income that you earn during the marriage is marital property. So anything that you purchase with marital property is deemed to be marital property. However, if you like, you can add a provision to the agreement that specifically says, whatever I earned during the marriage is separate property. And so we could put it into the separate property category. And that's an example of how you and your partner can design your own agreements. And you could have your own rules with respect to your finances together, and it'll be all documented in a legal document. In New York, in order for a prenuptial agreement to be enforceable, it needs to be signed under certain formalities. It's also important that each of you are separately represented by counsel. And there's also a number of statements that you'll each indicate, including that you weren't under the influence of alcohol or drugs, that you understand the agreement that you're signing. Once you have all of that documented in your agreement, the way to enforce the agreement is the two of you need to enforce the agreement. Or if you're not following the agreement, then the way to enforce it is to go to court and ask the judge to enforce the terms of your agreements. With the advent of AI and other companies out there that are putting together form documents and form prenuptial agreements, while it might seem to make your life a lot easier, it is extremely likely that these documents would not be appropriate or unique for your particular situation. So while you can get a quote unquote cookie cutter agreements, unless you understand the legal terminology and the implications of that, it's very difficult to rely upon it and trust that the agreements that you think that you're making with your partner in that agreement are actually going to be enforceable. If you're anything like me, the last thing you want to do is sign a document, they have no idea what you just signed, and then if things don't work out, now you're going to try to enforce the agreement. And if it doesn't say what you thought that it said because you didn't pay for an attorney to do a brief consultation with you to make sure that the agreement says what you thought it said, you may be stuck with enforcing an agreement that is nowhere near what you thought that you had agreed upon. If you have any additional questions about a prenuptial agreement and whether it's right for you, please give Sabra Law Group a call for a consultation.